really need you, Lord, to come through the things that are ahead of us, Lord. You see, Lord, this thought that you lay upon my heart, Lord, and we lay it all in your hands. In the name of Lord Jesus Christ, we pray. Amen. Now, the songs that have been sung really should have been attached to the sermon. The kids sung, "They that come unto me." I will not push away. It's the words of Jesus when they brought the children to him. That means someone is coming to him. And Evie sang the song, "Faith in God can change everything." And a lot of people live without meaning, without inner harmony, without light. And in the song that Heidi sung, "In the world you will have trouble, but I will give you peace." And really, all those songs kind of describes this sermon. There's trials, there's opposition, there's things you're facing, not just us sitting here, but no matter what we go through. And I heard a sermon here when I was on winter break here last week. And in this sermon, the brother called it, "Invite Jesus to your tomb." and I want to share some thoughts around that today. Invite Jesus to your tomb. That's quite a title on a sermon. Now, Brother Branham, in one of his sermons, he shares a testimony where he comes to an airport, and it's a transit landing, and as he's about to check into the next flight, the Lord speaks to him to go out. And I think this happened down in Memphis somewhere. I'm not sure. But the thing is, he thinks that he misses his flight by obeying the Lord, because the Lord just told him, "Just go. I have somewhere I want you to be now." He doesn't know where he's going. He doesn't know where it's going to take place. But he just starts walking. He leaves the airport. And he thought that he missed his plane and everything. But God made a way for him. But when he gets to the place, and then when he comes back to the airport again, he sees that God planned it out. He timed it, everything. He timed everything, and everything was just perfectly. And when we say that God has made a way, there's another story. You have Saul. He's sent out because there's some donkeys that are astray. And that's the time he's anointed as king. And when these donkeys are astray, he has to go search for them. And as he's searching for them, here Samuel comes, and he gets a hold of him, and he anoints him. And you may think, well, I'm out looking for these donkeys. That's what I got to do. But when it is all finished, when it is all done, someone tells him, "Hey, the donkeys you were looking for, they are now at home." So there was a problem, but it ends up well. It ends up how God made a way through it all. Same you read in the story about Moses. When Moses thinks that they will understand in Egypt that that he's their deliverer of the Israelites. But he ends up killing a man. He ends up being in the wilderness, shepherding sheep for 40 years. And he thought he lost it all. But through that, God made a way that he finds himself in front of a burning bush, and God speaks to him. But the way there was really demanding. It demanded a lot from Moses. And I'm certain of that, that he had some very hard days as he was counting sheep and thinking about what he had done back in Egypt and how everything turned out, how it ended up. He was one of the most high leaders in Egypt. And here he thinking God called him. And he enters into something, and then all of a sudden he finds himself in a position where all has been taken away from him. All is destroyed. And here I'm just shepherding sheep. That's all I'm doing right now. And Moses could probably look back and say, how did I end here? How did I end up here? But there is a way that God had made for him. He prepared a way. And the same thing when you read about Israel, when Moses was delivering the people of Israel, Moses is not coming saying, well, let's go. No. There is a way, there is a lot that is going to take place. And when they come, they see the signs, and they're thinking, it's going well for us now. And here, Pharaoh brings more hardship to them. He says, from now on, you will gather the hay before you make the bricks. So he adds burdens to the people. The people are tested harder, they're tried harder, their judgment upon them from the Egyptians. And when they're delivered, finally delivered, they think they're free. Now, finally, we're delivered. We're out of the hands of the Egyptians. And all of a sudden, we're facing a Red Sea. And then God brings them through the Red Sea. And then we're out water. And then God brings water. And then we're out food. And then God brings food. So there's so many things that the people of Israel has to go through. But they're tests. They're trials. Let's read in Mark chapter 3. That's really the only scripture I'm going to read today. But we're going to read a little bit from Mark chapter 3. Now here, we read in the story where there's a healing on the Sabbath. Verse 1, again he entered the synagogue, and a man was there with a withered hand. And they watched Jesus to see whether he would heal him on the Sabbath, so that they might accuse him. And he said to the man with the withered hand, come here. And he said to them, is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or to do harm, to save life or to kill? But they were silent. And he looked around at them with anger, grieved at their hardness of heart. And he said to the man, stretch out your hand. And he stretched it out. And his hand was restored. The Pharisees went out and immediately held counsel with the Herodians against him, how to destroy him. And that was not strange, because he had healed someone. Of course they wanted to destroy him. It's kind of, this is sad to read. How they wanted to destroy him for healing. Well, let's just read on. He looked around. Verse 6. The Pharisees went out, immediately had counsel with the Herodians against him, how to destroy him. And Jesus withdrew his disciples to the sea, and a great crowd followed from Galilee to Judea, and Jerusalem, and Idumea, and from beyond the Jordan, and from around Tyre and Sidon. When the great crowd heard all that he was doing, they came to him. So you could say here, Jesus is not seeking out the people. The people come to him because they see Jesus has something. Now, like the children sung this morning, they that come unto me. These are the words of Jesus. So they that come to him. And these chapters are really about that, coming to Jesus. And we're going to read some more, but there was so much people here that come to him from all kinds of areas around. So he withdrew himself, it says. But a great multitude followed him. And then he said them to keep a boat ready for him because of the multitude, so that they would not pressure around him to touch him. For he healed many, so that everyone that had need of it came to him to touch him. So they came to him. He didn't run around after others. No, they came to him. It was verse 9 and 10 that he read. And then he chooses the 12 apostles. And then he speaks about whether a kingdom come in conflict with itself, because they said it's by Beelzebub you're casting out demons and evil spirits. And it's like this. Let's just skip down to verse 20. He went home, and the crowd gathered again, so that they could not even eat. And when his family heard it, they went out. Who's that? The ones that were around Jesus. So when Jesus' family heard about what was going on, that there was so much people coming, they said, they went out to seize him, for they were saying, he is out of his mind. So his siblings said that. And if you skip down to verse 31, let's see, verse 31. And his mother and his brothers came standing outside. They sent to him and called him. And a crowd was sitting around him, and they said to him, your mother and your brothers are outside seeking you. And he answered them, who are my mother and my brothers? And looking about at those who sat around him, he said, here are my mother and my brothers. For whoever does the will of God is my brother and my sister and my mother. And then let's just skip to the next page. I didn't write it down, but let's just see if we can find it. It's chapter 6 in Mark, verse 3, I think. What did they say? They said, is not this the carpenter, the son of Mary, and brother of James and Joseph and Judas and Simon? Are not his sisters here with us? And they took offense at him, because he was really not high looked upon. They were irritated with him. Now, there were so much people around him that his family had to try to get him away. But so Jesus ordered a boat so he could stand in the boat and preach to the people because of the multitudes. And then turn to chapter 4 in Mark. I think he's reading in verse 1. Again, he began to teach beside the sea, and a very large crowd gathered about him, so that he got into a boat and set it in it on the sea. And the whole crowd was beside the sea on the land. And he was teaching them many things in parables. And his teaching, he said to them. So there was so much people that they had to get in a boat. And after a while, as he's telling them parables, and then later in same chapter 4, you skip down to verse 35. On that day, when evening had come, he said to them, "Let us go across to the other side." And leaving the crowd, they took him with them on the boat, just as he was, and other boats were with him. Now here, the people that were with him, the disciples, were fishermen. And what they used to do for a living was to fish on the Sea of Galilee, or Gennesaret. Yeah. And even today, people talk and say it may become very windy. They knew that. And I believe, I'm not a common fisherman, so I can't brag about that. But my family has, my father and his, and they know the weather better than I do. They can look at the weather. You know, common fishermen, they can look at the weather, at the direction of the wind, and they can tell how it's going to affect the sea. So they will interpret the weather, and they will say, is it smart to take the boat out now, or is it not? And then they may base their choices upon that. And these fishermen, they knew the sea. So they really knew how the weather would be and how it would affect the waters. Let's just read verse 37. And a windstorm arose, and the waves were breaking into the boat, so that the boat was already filling. So they were on their way, they were crossing the other side, and here the weather, the great windstorm arose. So these fishermen were terrified because they knew how bad the weather could get. So they were terrified, it says. And they didn't have any survival suits or life vests or anything like that. They had nothing. So they were afraid that they would die out there. But he was in the stern, asleep on the cushion. And they woke him and said to him, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" And he awoke and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, "Peace, be still." And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. So when they were crossing over from one side to the other, they had to go through a storm. They had to go through bad weather. That's why I started this sermon by telling how Moses also was facing a burning bush. But he had to go through something that did something to him. And that's what shaped the man. But the thing is, for these men or these situations we're reading from now, when you come in a situation like we have just read about, well, just compare it with, say you're crossing the mountain, and the mountains in Norway can get real bad. And Remi and Anya, they were going to Vinstra just now, and they had to spend the night in Oppdal because of bad weather. They couldn't cross the mountain, and then you think, what am I doing here? Who, like the people on the boat, who made us take this trip in the first place? The weather is so bad. Who told us to cross to the other side? And that's how people think. And when people think fast like that, they think, well, I'm not doing this any longer. We're turning around, we're going back home. And that's how things are in life. And that's really what I'm looking at. Things in life, we end up in situations, in problems that we face, make you want to turn around and go back. feeling, oh no, I don't want to do this. I don't want to go through this. I want to turn around and go back. Like these fishermen we read about. I don't think they would have made this trip if they would have seen the storm coming, the wind. But they didn't see it. It just came sudden. And it was brutal. But I also believe they were thinking, we need to go back. We need to find a harbor. We need to get into land so we save our lives. And as people, that's how we are. When tests comes or trials comes or difficulties come our way, we always want to get out of it. We want to get around it somehow. But God wants to lead you through it. But man always wants to go around the problem or go back. Like when God came to Moses facing the burning bush, Moses had 1,000 excuses. He said, God, I can't talk. Send someone else. I can hardly walk. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. And God got angry with him. Because Moses was picturing how he would face the Egyptians again. And that was so big deal for him, he didn't want to do it. And when you think about Gideon as well, here Gideon brings his soldiers to go into warfare. The first thing that happens is he who's afraid can go home. And there were many that went home. They thought, this is too tough for me, because they're 5 times many as we are. And several thousand went home. And in man's eyes, we kind of pull ourselves back when the trials and difficulties come. But like we said now, the boat was being filled here now because of the wind and the ocean. The boat was already filling. So this was not just a breeze. No, it was a storm. And as they're sitting in this boat, and then after Jesus calms the storm, then we skip to chapter 5, verse 1. Okay? They came to the other side of the sea, the country of the Gerasenes. And when Jesus had stepped out of the boat, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit. Now this man, he lived in a graveyard. If you see the cemetery up here in downtown here in Verdal, it's a graveyard. We have a graveyard there. There's lots of tombs there, and a lot of people go there and light candles for their loved ones who have gone on. But if someone would have lived there, you probably would have been scared to go there. Now, the one we read about here, he was crazy, and he lived. It says he lived among the tombs. And when you go to the tombs, and if you go to a graveyard, like we have here in town, little points you forward as you are in a cemetery. What does the priest say? Peace over the memory of such and such, because that's what they do. On a graveyard, there's only memories. It's memories of what is behind us, of things that has been, people that has been. There's nothing in the future when you're in a cemetery. There's no future. So a cemetery is a place that we go to remember something that has been or someone that has lived. And this man, it says in verse 3, he lived among the tombs. So this man had no future. He only had a past, and he had a present. And this is where he lived. And let's just read on a little bit here. Like I said, he lived among the tombs, verse 3, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain. For he had often been bound with shackles and chains, but he wrenched the chains apart, and he broke the shackles in pieces. No one had the strength to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs, on the mountains, he was always crying out and cutting himself with stones. And another place you read, he says he hit himself with stones. So a lot of people have been there trying to direct this man. And I'm not talking about this man. I'm talking about people of today that live among tombs. Because people do that still. And you see here, they had tried to lead him. They tried to help him. They tried to shackle him. They tried to chain him. They've tried probably to medicate him. They've tried to threaten him. They've tried to buy him. They've tried to deny him things. They've tried to lure him into things. But nothing gets a hold of this man. Because he's living in a hopelessness. Like the song that Evie sung. People live without a meaning, without a light, without a hope. They're living in a tomb. They're living among tombs. There's no future. Only memories that are there. Now, I work as a teacher in school. And we find ourselves in many different situations. We have students that we want to do a presentation, and the student will say, I can't, I got anxiety. There are students that have such anxieties that they don't dare to go through the canteen or the cafeteria in the school. And many, many years ago, I told a story where I felt anxiety too in my life. I remember, I can just share it again. I was going to drive Isaac to the airport, and I was happy, and I was sitting in my car, and it was very nice weather, and I drove my foster son to the airport. And here I was going back from the airport, and I was driving, and all of a sudden something just hit me. I did not understand, what is this? So I started having difficulty breathing. I'm thinking, I'm going to pass out. But if I pass out now, then I'm going to crash with the cars. So I had to find like a parking lot, and I made a turn. And I thought, if I pass out in the car now and someone sees me, maybe I'll lose my license. So I need to get out. So I got out of the car, and I thought, I need to act like I'm looking at something on my car. So I was so afraid of passing out. So I called Nina, my wife, and I said, Nina, something is happening with me now. I can't make it home. And she couldn't help me. And I thought, I need to try to do something. So I got back in the car, and then I drove to the next pit stop. And then I made it to the next pit stop, and then I came to Austin. I'm thinking, I need to go in here. Maybe I need sugar. So I went and I bought myself a Coke and a chocolate. And as I'm standing to pay, I think I'm about to pass out. So I buy this, and then I go out, and then I lay on the grass, and I lay on the grass for about half an hour to an hour until I make it back into the car, And after 2-3 hours, I'm able to make it home. And I go to bed, and I sleep 2 hours. And after those 2 hours of sleep, I wake up and I'm thinking, what in the world happened here? And as I try to do some research, what is this? They call it panic anxiety. And I'm thinking, I need to learn some strategies if this happens again. And there are strategies. It's about breathe in, hold your breath, breathe out. There's some things you can do to get through it. And long after I was going to drive through tunnels, I felt it come back. I was afraid that it would come again in a tunnel. And that's what makes it come, when you're afraid of it coming. And I had to start to just think about something else, talk about something else. And because I experienced it myself, I can talk to students about this. And I can give my own testimony. But people struggle so much about this anxiety they have. And if I talk about it to students, either they can't or they don't want or they can't do it. And they're in such a status quo that they're just permanent. And their parents are anxious about it. And a student at a young age can't see further than present time. There's no future. There's no forward. They're just among tombs. And this is where you're at. But we need to look at what's ahead. And really, I can't talk other people. I can't talk healing to people that'll heal them. And the man we read about here, who lived among the tombs, what does it say about him? It says he had an unclean spirit. Verse 8. The Bible speaks about unclean spirits. Well, that's possession. They're possessed. Today, we talk about anxiety, not about being possessed. And no one can calm the storm that is in your life. And this is not a good story, but I have to share it. I worked with someone once, and he told me there were two twins. One lived in the south, and the other one lived in this area. And in the south, the one twin who lived and his neighbor, they were good friends. And one morning, when he came out, he found his friend had hung himself in his garage, the neighbor of the twin, and it just caught him off guard, and he struggled so much with this incident that he ended up hanging himself after that incident. And they went and got his twin, and they had him under surveillance so that he wouldn't do it too. The other twin. And I just remember this story was told by someone I work with. And they were so afraid for that. And people are so afraid of having panic anxiety that they have panic anxiety. You're so afraid of throwing up that you throw up. You're so afraid of standing in front of people thinking you pass out, and then you pass out because you're afraid of passing out. Now, this man we read about, the man who lived among the tombs, he was given up by everyone. There was no hope for him. There was no chance. They had tried everything in their might, in their power, to change him. Like we read, tied him up with chains and shackles, but they gave up on him. And he gave up on them too. So here he lived in this mess, running around among the tombs. And today, there's never been as much mental health as today. It's enormous. This man cut himself with stones. Another place we read, threw hit himself with stones. We call it self damaging today. I've also seen that where people cut themselves. And when people do that, 18%, almost 20% of all youths between 12 and 18 years do that. Internationally, about between 13 to 23% of youth do self-damaging, self-cutting. 4% of grown-ups do it. And self-destructing is an attempt to regulate and to is an attempt to take away mental pain by afflicting physical pain on your body. 22% of we're doing it in one school, and 15% at a high school we're doing it. These are crazy numbers. The thing is, when this man, because it says, if we read further, when he saw Jesus from far off, he ran towards him and cast himself, fell down before him. That was verse 6. Jesus was there, but he came running towards Jesus, fell down before him. So this man had probably tried everything possible. And like I said, like I already said, they tried everything in their might to make this man well. But all of a sudden, this man himself felt, maybe this is the solution to my troubles. Or maybe he even prayed about this. So this was something that could help him. And really, there's so few people that seek Jesus in their need. People seek all kind of other things. 16 to 22% of the Norwegian people have mental problems or mental health problems. That's a crazy number. So you need to come to a place where there's nothing else left to try. That's when people end up trying God. It's only God left, so I'll try him now. And the prodigal son too, he was in his position too. He came to the place where everything else seemed hopeless. Then he was on his way home. So, verse 6, and when he saw Jesus from afar, he ran and fell down before him, and crying out with a loud voice, he said, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I adjure you by God, do not torment me." For he was saying to him, "Come out of him, the unclean spirit, you unclean spirit." And Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" He replied, "My name is Legion, for we are many." Now, a legion is about 6,000. That's a number of 6,000, I think. And his, what is your name? He says Legion because for we are many. And there are many. It's anxiety, it's regret, it's hatred, it's hopelessness, it's toxic, it's loser, it's schizophrenic, it's depression, it's phobia, it's eating disorder, ADHD, antidepressiva, sleeping pills, There's just so much, so many. My name is Legion. We're many. It's enormous, all of this. And what happens is they have lots of people around them. There's so much people. There were so much people around Jesus. Like he had to go to the ocean with a boat. And when Jesus says we're going to the other side, they're through a storm to come to exact this one man that is there. There's no one else but him there on this tomb place, cemetery. He's the one that is there. And when Jesus comes, he comes running towards him, saying, there's a hope here. Because Jesus has all power, both in heaven and on earth. So whether man will only invite Jesus to their tomb place, to the place where they're at, that has no future because they only look back, they only have memories. And where they're at, there with their many disorders, like Legion is my name. It's a place without future. And there's so many people that live in this tomb or this cemetery. But they can let go and get rid if they want to. It may be sickness has placed them there. If you're really sick, sickdom can place you there because you can see, I don't have a future because I'm dying of this disease, and that places you in a cemetery. There may be a lot of young people there too, and there may be a lot of elderly people that are not there because they see this goes so much further because they have a future. They know there's coming a kingdom. There's coming an eternal day. There's coming a millennium and an eternal day. Then you're not in a cemetery because then you're seeing something. You have a future in what you're doing. But if you're in a hopelessness, you're staggering. You've hit the wall. You said, I can't make it go any further. I can't make it any further. And when the man says, my name is Legion, for we are many, and man, they live in these dark places. And what I'm thinking about is, when you read about the woman that had issue with blood, she was dying. But what she said was, if I could only touch the hem of his garment, I can be well. I can be healed. Meaning she was dying of her sickness, but she was not in a cemetery. She was not among tombs because she could see a future. Then you have done an outreach, towards Christ. You may have disappointments in life. You may have been placed in a cemetery among tombs without hope, without God. And I thought about it. That's why I wrote the song, Give Me Another Chance. Because when you see Moses, when he made a mistake, God gave him a second chance. Peter messed up. Jesus gave him a second chance. There were disappointments. God had to put Moses in a wilderness. And he could only look back and he could say, well, I remember when I did this and I did that and I was in Egypt. And there was no future. Until God placed him in there. Same in the story of David, in the story of Peter and Paul. They all had to stand up, get up to their feet and stand up. Invite Jesus to your cemetery. Because he says, before Simon met you while you were sitting under the fig tree, I saw you. And what was that talking about? Well, he knew when he sat under that fig tree, he had a prayer in his heart. This is Nathaniel. He had a prayer in his heart. And that's what Jesus was referring to when he was under the fig tree. And like the man in the cemetery here, among the tombs, it could be there was a cry in him saying, something has to happen. Someone has to come to deliver me. And then Jesus comes there. But he himself had to go towards Jesus. So he had to go there. And in 1 second, Legion was gone. And he was made new. And then you also say, in all my trials, there were no trials. In all my battles, there were no battles. So all the difficulties, all the trials, all the tribulations, they may be so huge. But when you come to the point and you lay it all down and you say, I'll lay it here, I'll leave it here, then it's gone. He takes it away. And in my own life, I've experienced how it can be so hard, but then really it's not that hard. He will set you free. He will make you free. And you think it's impossible, but it is not. And you may think, well, I need to talk to someone about this. I need to talk to my pastor about this. I didn't have to. I was in a basement myself. There was no pastor there. But God was there. Same thing with Moses. Well, I need a pastor. No, there was a bush burning. And God was there. That's the thing. And Paul, there was a light, and there was a voice that spoke out from the light. And Jesus said, when he said to the crippled man, he said, take thy bed and walk. You laid her long enough. Take up your bed and walk. I was humming a song this morning, and I was reminded it was a concert I was at. I need to look at the lyrics because we were in the Levanger church on a concert with this Norwegian singer called Sigvard Dagslein. And this song he sung goes like this: when I see heavy clouds hover us, a darkness over us, and I see them sharpening their knives, picking a fight, can I do something about it? Can I do something about it? When I see that when I see someone elevate as pushing others down, when I see many are trembling and bending off for what is happening, can I do something about that? Can I do something about that? What can I do? I'm so little. What can I do? I am so little. Help us together, we that believe that much we can do if we want while we wait here on earth. When I see that your dreams are fading and your visions are blurry, when I see that doubt rules your life, and I see we are of little faith, can I do something about it? Can I do something about it? That's the song. And I was thinking about it. We can sit down. I can sit myself down here with my cup in my hand, and I can ask you to put money in my cup. serve me through life. I can lay at home thinking I'm going to lay here. But there was one shouting after Jesus, "Oh, Son of David, have mercy on me." When Jesus was there, he went to Jesus. In every situation you read, they came to Jesus. Jesus was there and they came to him. Like the man among the tombs. But they had to make the move towards him. Now, can I do something about it? So they came to him. The multitudes were flocking around him. He had to find a boat, to stand on the sea to speak to them, because there were so many, because they felt they needed to get a hold of what he had. So invite Jesus to your tomb place or your cemetery. If you are in a tough place and you don't see a future, you're only living on memories, then invite him in to your life. Because that's what can make the change. That is what's going to make the change. Because he's there. But man needs to make the move to meet him. To go toward him. And can I do something about it? Yes, you can. And I will finish what I started reading. And this is the story about brother. Like I started by saying, when Brother Branham was at the airport, and he left the airport, and he doesn't know where he's going. And at this time, he had walked into one of the poor neighborhoods in Memphis. It was a dirt road with potholes, and he was walking down this road. Further, he saw a big woman, colored woman, leaning over the fence, watching him as he was walking by. She had a shirt that's a scarf around her head, and she said, "Good morning, Pastor." And he said, "Good morning, Auntie." And he stopped up. And then it struck him. She called him Pastor. And he turned towards her and he asked, "Do you know who I am?" She said, "Yeah." "No." "Well, how do you know I wasn't a pastor?" She said, "Well, I knew you were coming." And she went to the gate. "How could you know that I would come? I didn't even know myself that I was coming here." She explained, "Pastor, have you ever read in the Bible about this Sumanite woman who couldn't have a child? And she promised God if God would give her a child, she would raise him to serve him. Well, I'm such a woman. I promised God the same thing. He gave me a baby, and I tried my best to raise him. But a few years ago, he came in among bad company. He chose the wrong way, and he got a disease, syphilis. And now he's dying in the bed, back right in my house. And the doctor told him that there's no hope. He has a hole in his heart, and he's full of bacteria. So expect the worst anytime." So, Pastor, I couldn't hold out seeing my son in this condition. I wanted him to be saved. So I was praying all last night and praying and say, "Lord, if I'm like the Sumanite woman, where is your Elijah?" And I fell asleep, and I dreamed that I came standing by the gate. I dreamed that a pastor came by in a hat and in a brown suit. And so when I woke up, I got up and I stood here, and I've been standing here since, waiting for you. So, Pastor, do you believe to be led by the Spirit? Bill trembled, and his nerves as well. This had to be where the Lord wanted him to be. And he said, "My name is Brother Branham. Have you ever heard of me?" She said, "No." "Well, Pastor Branham, I've never heard about you before." So when she had this vision or this dream, she didn't sit inside. She went out waiting. There's a meeting that needs to take place. Like at the house of Cornelius, they sent men to get Peter. God sent Peter to meet the man. There has to be an action on your side. You can't sit at home in a cemetery place thinking, I can't make it any longer, and you still sit there. No, you need to do your part. You need to go towards the hope that is presented before you. But if you just sit still and you remember and you sit there and remember the things that has been, you're in a cemetery. A cemetery is no place to be. You need to make an effort then to get something better. Amen.